Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you're all joining us feeling good on this Monday afternoon. Thanks for joining us for our second installment of Doing Business with National Grid. We had a very good meeting with National Grid about a month ago and learned quite a bit about that organization and the scope of what they do that probably is a little bit more than most of us appreciate, but also I learned a lot about their procurement services across different business lines, and we're going to continue that conversation today. As part of our Pacesetters program, we convene these conversations to try to help grow the volume of activity related to MBE participation with major corporations that do business here in Massachusetts. And one of the focuses of this Doing Business With series is to bring some transparency to corporate procurement procedures and thereby opening up the doors to business opportunities, particularly for Black and Brown business people in our community. So I want to thank National Grid for their willingness to do this not once but twice over the past month. I think people that are here are in for a real treat. The first one was amazing, and I can't imagine that National Grid has done anything like this in a local situation like they're doing today. So thank you to National Grid. And, you know, as I said, it's about providing opportunity, and it's a journey that we're on here at the Chamber and the Greater Boston business community to focus on procurement as a way of creating systemic opportunity within Massachusetts. A few notes before we begin. I want to thank our sponsors of our economic opportunity programming, including Pacesetters, John Hancock, and Eastern Bank, who have stepped up in a big way over several years, really. We're very appreciative of their continued partnership and the way that they demonstrate their citizenship here in Boston and in Massachusetts. I wanted to flag for everyone that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page shortly after the presentation. And I want to encourage all of the attendees and participants to submit questions throughout the webinar, really, using the Q&A feature, and we'll make sure at that point in the program to get them to our guests from National Grid. We have quite a lineup today from National Grid, and I'm going to begin by introducing first Carla Ramsny, the Global Senior Director of Supply Chain Corporate Social Responsibility at National Grid. In her role, Carla leads the coordination, integration, and of all supply chain diversity and sustainability strategies across the company's global footprint, and it is truly global. A special shout out to Carla. She's been a key part of our Pacesetters program representing National Grid and finding equitable opportunities for businesses of color to participate, but as importantly, being a voice in many of the conversations we have with other companies about moving forward on this procurement initiative. So thank you for all that work, Carla, and welcome. We'll also feature today Leonard Durant. Len is Principal Program Manager at National Grid. In this role, Len is developing a strategy for enlarging external contractor resources for National Grid's gas businesses. Len has watched National Grid grow its diversity spend from literally nothing to a multi-million-dollar award-winning program that stands as an example in the industry. So I'm sure, Len, as you share some stories and strategies and tactics, we'll learn a lot from you. In today's presentation, Len will share how the National Grid procurement team has partnered with their supplier diversity group to identify, validate, and attract minority suppliers worldwide. We'll also hear from Brianna LaGuardia. Brianna is the buyer for gas construction pipeline services. In her role, Brianna focuses on sourcing events related to spill response, transportation, and disposal of regulated waste. Brianna uses her experience in environmental services to build long-lasting relationships with prime and subcontractors in the sector. Thank you for joining us today, Brianna. We'll also hear from Nicola Rigby-White. Nicola is the Director of Gas Procurement for National Grid. Nicola began her career with the National Grid United Kingdom Gas Division as an associate buyer before relocating to the United States. Welcome, Nicola. And I'd also like to introduce Eric Campbell. Eric is the Category Manager of Global Procurement in Facilities, Fleet, Logistics, Aviation, Property, and Security. So Eric manages multiple departments within the National Grid family. Eric's committed to developing strong, diverse supply chains that reflect the communities that National Grid services. So thank you for joining us and for that work, Eric. And our final introduction is Simon Harnett. Simon is the Vice President of U.S. Procurement for National Grid. For 20 years, Simon has worked with National Grid in various roles and now leads the U.S. procurement team. Simon is committed to providing opportunities to diverse business partners in order to support the communities National Grid operates. So quite a lineup from National Grid today, and I'll hand it off to Simon to begin today's program.
Thanks, Jim, and good afternoon, everybody. Today, I hope the team and I can continue the process of bringing some transparency as to how to do business with National Grid and really provide you all with some opportunities to start to make connections with the procurement team. As Jim said, this is the second instalment, and today we're going to be talking about opportunities in our gas business and in our support services areas as well. The previous session we had focused on opportunities in our electricity business. Now, before I pass across to the team, I'd just like to cover off a couple of pieces in my opening remarks. So the first piece is really a little bit of background about National Grid, and then the second piece will be about what is important to us as National Grid. So National Grid, we're an electricity, gas and distribution and transmission company. We are a global organisation. We operate in the UK and the US. So in the UK, we own and operate the electricity transmission network in England and Wales, and we're responsible for transporting electricity from where it's generated to the point of use. And we also own and operate the gas transmission system across Great Britain and are responsible for balancing supply and demand on that network. In the US, we're based here in the Northeast, and unlike the UK, we actually directly serve customers. We supply energy directly to customers. We own and operate electricity distribution networks, transmission networks, and gas distribution and transmission networks across New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. And in the US, we have some 17,000 employees, and we serve the energy needs of the best part of 20 million people. We have a key role to play actually at the heart of the energy transition. We actually invest significantly in our asset base to support that. So here in the US, we're investing to the tune of $4 billion a year. And to deliver that investment, we depend on a really broad set of supply chain relationships. And we procure a really broad range of services, from things such as high voltage electricity construction activity, right the way through to things like landscaping at our facilities. And this in turn provides a broad range of opportunities for contractors, either as direct prime contractors to National Grid, or in turn working as a subcontractor for one of our primes. And as you can imagine with gas and electricity, a lot of what we do is actually high risk and is complex, and safety and reliability are of paramount importance for us. And therefore, as you can imagine, the barriers to entry can sometimes be very high. And we've often found that the best route for people looking to get a foot in the door is to start to build a relationship with one of our prime contractors, build the dialogue, start the conversation, and really start to grow the opportunities from there. So in addition to safety and reliability, responsible business is also really important to National Grid. And we believe that businesses need to stand for more than just profitability. And we look for opportunities to demonstrate that broader contribution to society. We've identified a number of areas where we believe we can have the most impact on the environment, the communities we serve, and our people. And we've set these out in what we call our Responsible Business Charter. And Carla and the team will cover this off in a little bit. But as part of that responsible business charter, one of our key commitments is that we're going to work across our supply chains to ensure that together we reflect the diversity of the communities we serve and that we respond to the economic needs of those communities. We also have ambitions to build partnerships with small and local businesses and actually all suppliers who set clear ambitions related to the environment, the diversity, well-being, and really good corporate governance. And we recognise that our procurement activity actually represents a really powerful opportunity for economic inclusion. And this afternoon is about starting to make the connections to help progress these commitments and ambitions. So thank you very much for attending. I'm looking forward to the session and your participation, and I'm delighted to pass across to Carla to set up the programme for this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Simon. So if you go to the next slide, please. So as you've heard from Simon, and for those who might have been here when we did part 1 last month, National Grid is very much committed to diversifying its supply chain. And as Simon shared, this particular session, we're now giving you the other half and what we do within the procurement organization. So you cannot do that without having leadership at the very top. So when you look at the top of our organization, we have John Pettigrew, who is our Chief Executive Officer, who has made a commitment to stand behind diversifying our supply chain. And I'll read his quote, which says, "Our business remains at the center of one of the 21st century's greatest challenges to build affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy systems that can supply tomorrow's world with energy needs today." And a key part of that is our global supplier diversity policy. This policy has been signed by John Pettigrew. It stands as the direction that my team works to in order to diversify supply chain and in partnership with the procurement team. So the team itself is, just so you're aware, diversity is what we're going to focus on today, but I did want you to understand that we are broader than just diversity. So we are supply chain corporate social responsibility, and we look at all risk as it pertains to the supply chain and how we can reduce those risks and contribute to societal benefits that will promote climate change, respect human rights, gender equality, and supply diversity. And all of these things together are looking at the social, economic, and environmental impacts that impact our supply chain. It is a global program, as Simon mentioned. We're a global company, and so we have the US and you have the UK. So I have a support system on both sides of the pond, if you will. And what undergirds that are supply chain CSR ambassadors. So those who do not directly work in my team, but are throughout the procurement organization and broader also than the procurement organization, who work to help support and drive diversity spend in our procurement operations. Next slide, please. So from a broader context, just to help tie things in, we do look at the UN Global Goals. That's extremely important. And when you look at the 17 goals, 12 of them we actually contribute to. And this is really, really important because this was also taken in consideration when the Responsible Business Charter, as Simon mentioned, was launched. So it was launched this past October, and this sets out who National Grid seeks to be and how we stand and what is our purpose. So there are 5 pillars. There's one around environment and what our commitments are and our ambitions, our communities, our people, the economy, and the governance, where the supply diversity, which we'll talk about today, sits inside the economy pillar, which I'll go into more detail and how that plays out in the procurement organization. Next slide, please. So we've developed a MWBE diversity action plan in support of the economy pillar. And as you see here, again, tying in with the global goals, which is 5, 10, and 4. So in this MWBE diversity action plan, we look at contracts and looking to increase the number of contracts with MWBEs. We look at tier 2. So that is subcontracting spend. So when we're working with a non-diverse supplier and they are subcontracting out, those subcontracts have opportunity. That's one way to come into the door. Simon shared with you some of the things that we procure are it's quite rigorous to come in at a tier 1 and what the requirements are, but at a tier 2 to be a sub, that is one entry point into, we're doing work on behalf of National Grid. We have mentorship programs, right? Just like the one that we're doing here with the Pacesetters. So these are opportunities to build skills, and this is skills beyond just what you would get for a National Grid. You once you get those skills, obviously you have the ability to be able to bid on contracts for corporations all over. Then we have got the communication, because this is a very important part in making sure that we promote and we recognize performance of MWBs that work with us, so that more performance, the better you work, the more opportunities can come your way. So that's really important, making sure that we have a strong communication plan so that people understand who you are and what you do and how you can support. And then, of course, there's the training piece. So working with the procurement organization and helping them to have the skill sets that they need so that they can integrate and do supplier inclusion really easily without having my team be there alongside, just giving them what they need. So these are kind of what we've looked at as our 5 pillars on this MWB diversity action plan that we put in place. And when you see on the next slide, in this MWB diversity action plan, we work within the procurement categories. So in March, we talked about electric services and we talked about transmissions team. This session, we're going to be talking about gas, construction, and indirects. So you would talk about those procurement categories where we can get MWB participation. And we also look in, just so you know, a little broader. So, it's MWB, but we also look at all other diversity classifications as well. There's quite a few. There's veteran, there's small, there's hub zone, there's a number of them that fall under diversity. But those opportunities then show up as tier 1 direct. So those are direct contracts within National Grid, or subs, as I mentioned, coming in with some of our large tier 1 suppliers, or you can be a sub underneath them into our tier 2 program. And then we've got mentorship programs like what we're doing here. And we have recommendations on which MBEs should be involved in these mentorship programs. And then you've got community outreach and making sure that we are doing the legwork to support and get out there to find the MWBs, bring them into National Grid's awareness so that there are those opportunities so that they can compete and win contracts in the future. Next slide. And just a few other ways that we look to increase our diversity spend. So we talked about the mentorship programs, because when we develop and grow a supplier, that supplier then has an opportunity to get more business and have opportunity not only to do more business in National Grid, but for economic development in general, economic development as a whole. So mentorship programs are really, really, really important to build skill sets. We're at trade shows, we do matchmakers. Matchmakers are fantastic because we're able to then take MWBs that are very specific to a particular category team, like what we're doing here, and making sure we've got the right buyer that's going to be matched up with the right supplier. Roundtable discussion. So this is another kind of best practice. What's happening, right? You cannot learn and develop and grow and understand the new things that are happening if you're not out there a part of these discussions and talking them through. The promoting of our program through local, regional, and national publications. So that's really also important, because that's also where I learn about where there are other diverse suppliers that I can bring into the mix. So I might highlight some that working with National Grid, but then I learned about others that other companies are using, which are really good. Hosting National Grid purchasing exchanges. Well, this is similar to what we're doing right now. Can't be in person, But we can do things like this, right? And we can do things through a virtual setting, so that we can learn how do you do business with National Grid. Partnering organizations that promote supply diversity, so that kind of points to what's happening on the right side, both the last two, the sponsorship and the partnering. So there are many organizations that we partner with, Pacesetters obviously being one, WeBank. Then we've got NMSDC on here. We have Elite SDVOB. There are so many, but we partner with organizations that represent diversity so that we can find where those diverse suppliers are, so that we can find opportunities to help support them. And the final slide is just around just a few facts around the supply diversity program. So on average, we're about 900 million spend in diversity, which accounts for about 43% of our U.S. procurement influence spend with over 4,000 suppliers. And since 2009, we've gotten about 60 industry awards for the work that we're doing in supply diversity. So this is really, really important for National Grid to continue to push and to develop diverse suppliers and to make sure that we are representing the communities that we serve. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brianna LaGuardia, who is our star buyer in the gas construction.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's session. As mentioned, my name is Brianna LaGuardia. I am a buyer on the gas construction team with a focus on environmental services. So pleased to be here this afternoon to provide you with an overview of the categories that our team supports on gas construction and in the gas materials realm at National Grid. So with that, thank you. There are three key categories under gas pipeline services. We have gas pipeline services, gas construction, and gas materials. So all of these are areas where our team is responsible in developing category strategy and the sourcing aspects. So for pipeline services, some of the key subcomponents of that are leak survey and inside inspection, corrosion services, damage prevention, non-destructive testing, and LNG, CNG construction, as well as environmental services. And we have gas construction, which focuses on construction, non-complex and complex, paving, reg pits, and post-construction landscaping restoration. And then gas materials, we have pipe, steel, and plastic, valves, fittings, couplings, flanges, leak detectors, and gas capital equipment. These are all the areas that we oversee on the gas construction team. And before I turn it over to Nicola to speak about upcoming opportunities, please note that all of these categories do require certain certifications. So that'll be explained in more detail by Len Durant in the wrap-up slide. And with that, Nicola, I'll turn it over to you to present upcoming opportunities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brianna, for that overview. Really appreciate the Boston Chamber Commerce here and Pacesetters' opportunity to come to speak with you all today. As Brianna noted, I run the gas construction division, which forms the three parts of our commercial arm, which supports our construction activity across the gas business, our materials, and our services. So very excited to be here to explain to you some of the opportunities that we believe that now can drive you being at heart of the vision for National Grid. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. And as Brianna outlined, and I think you've heard Simon and Carla talk about, there are a number of areas of where we look to support across our prime area, which is our tier 1 and our top MBE suppliers. I won't now read through this for you, but as you can see, there's a lot of areas that we support and a lot of our fantastic supply base that supports us as well. And just really wanting to focus in clearly that the alignment that you have the opportunity with is really developing the relationships through our subcontractors. So those suppliers that you see that are our primes that are listed there, they are your opportunity to enable that through a subcontractor requirement and work with not only our top suppliers and our primes, but really to try and focus in to understand and align the business services that you can provide and support the areas that we are looking to drive value into National Grid. So I heard Jim mention earlier that we are a local company, and we want to try and diversify our local supply base to ensure that our customers see companies that are reflective in our environment, and also that they can support where we need to and deliver, especially on some of these really critical services that we provide out to our customers. So I want to again thank now for our ongoing relationship with Pacesetters. And with this, what we intend to do is make sure that you really truly understand how to get involved with National Grid and our subcontractor base. And with that, I will turn over to Len Durant, who I've worked with for a long time. And Len will now hopefully walk us through what that means for us and what it means hopefully to you. And happy to turn it over, Len. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nicola. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. We welcome you to this overview of National Grid, and we thank Chamber for providing that opportunity. As both Brianna and Nicola spoke to, there's a diverse area of gas construction that we deal with. I happen to oversee our resource strategy, which in a nutshell talks about how we maintain enough contractors and suppliers to get the work done out in the public, such as electric and gas. It's seamless to you folks. You just hit a switch, the lights come on, you turn on the stove, the gas comes on. But behind the scenes with all that, there's a lot that goes on. What I want to talk about today is how you would get into being able to work with National Grid in some of our top suppliers, as Nicola alluded to on the previous slide. I'll be perfectly honest with you, where the great opportunities tend to lie in our construction services arenas, both in electric and gas, is in the tier 2 or subcontractor roles. The tier 1s are more geared to folks in the construction business who not only know construction, but they know gas construction. They know how to open holes, they know how to fit pipe, they know how to pressurize these pipes. There is a lot of qualification that goes into these contractors. It's a dangerous job, but we also maintain that it's a safe job. National Grid is clearly focused on safety when it comes to any of our construction services. So as I said, entry opportunities probably lie better in tier 2. What does that mean? In the area of tier 2, we have different focus areas where our primes really don't get involved in a lot. They're looking for resources to help them get the jobs done. You have to know the marketplace. You have to be able to partner with similar suppliers. But some of the areas of growth outside of the prime 1 and into the tier 2 are welding, restoration, and paving. Restoration, we open up a lot of holes in the street. Those holes have to be restored to the individual cities and towns specs. So we can't just open a hole and slap anything down. So we need to be involved in making sure that we restore these properties to the state they were in before we opened that hole. Another big area of focus is pipeline safety and inspection. There's a lot that goes on to make sure that we deliver gas safely. And part of that is making sure that our pipelines are safe and we're constantly inspecting them for any leaks or any inferior pipe or any degradation of pipe that may go on over time. And I kind of blew by it, but welding is something that we really look for. Our primes do not have enough welders out here. It is a very succinct field where there are qualifications to it, but welding is probably one of the best ways to get into this business as a tier 2. And another focus area for us is safety. We're constantly monitoring and looking at the process for maintaining our sites in a safe manner. This includes things like making sure that we get rid of environmental waste, bringing different soils and whatnot to backfill our holes, so on and so forth. As part of all of this process, we have to onboard these individual suppliers, and there is a stringent process for that, as Carla and other folks alluded to. In order to become part of National Grid, you have to operate in an extremely safe environment. We require a lot of standards that you must adhere to before we bring you on to National Grid. We also look for the capability of any contractors that we bring on. Are they capable of doing the work, not just in any environment, but in the national grid environment? Is there a direct fit for purpose? Typically, a lot more of the stringent requirements are for our tier one suppliers because they work with unions typically, and they have to pass a bunch of different tests in order to be able to even lay pipe for national grid and supply the gas services that you need as the public. Our onboarding process, as I said, is pretty stringent. We typically do a meet and greet with potential contractors. We get a little bit into how they do their business, what they do in their business. We also want to make sure that they're viable and that they're going to be around. So we get into their areas of business, such as their economies and how they keep things going from a day-to-day basis, and if they're financed and capitalized appropriately. The other piece of our onboarding process is typically we go out and kick the tires on our contractors and suppliers. We want to see what you do on a day-to-day basis. So we'll go out and look at folks to see what they do in the course of their day to make sure that they're a good fit, because all our contractors that we bring on board are tied to the need. There is a need that we must fulfill when bringing on contractors, and we want to make sure that those we bring in are really a good fit for us. So in closing and in summary, I would say if you're looking to become a contractor with National Grid or a supplier with National Grid, take a look at the tier two opportunities as I spoke to before. Do a little research on National Grid and the different types of businesses that we operate. Reach out to us, and there will be some information on how to contact us later on in the presentation. Reach out to any of us. We can give you further information going downstream about how you become a supplier. Look at who is out there doing the prime work, the tier ones, the gas construction people. Start looking at trying to establish relationships with them as well, because they're also, like we are, looking for suppliers to bring on board to their different business concerns. So in a nutshell, it's a great opportunity here at National Grid. We're very focused on bringing in diverse suppliers. We're very focused on bringing in capable suppliers. So I would encourage you to feel free to tie out to us and reach out to us. And any of us will be more than willing to help you in the process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Crockett, who will give you a little bit of information and tie into the indirect services. Eric?
Hello, this is Eric Crawford. Just a moment as I get my video up, please. Thank you, Len. I appreciate the nice welcome. I want to say thank you to the Boston Chamber, Simon Harnett and Carla Hunter Ramsny for inviting me to talk today. If we'd like to go to the next slide, please. So I've been chosen to represent the indirect team. The indirect team is made up of many different category managers, of which I'm one. We have a team of 5. The indirect team covers a multitude of different services, as you can see here. We cover professional services, corporate services, general consulting, technical consulting, MRO, energy efficiency, facilities, logistics, fleet equipment and spares, fuel and transport, and man guard services, and other security equipment. Each of these have a large component of spend, which I can talk to you briefly in each different one. But in the sense of professional services, that's more of our consulting, as it relates to everything from safety consulting to organizational design. Corporate services includes cafeteria, mailroom, other benefit type of opportunities, and general consulting is pretty self-evident there. Technical consulting is more in tune with engineering design, where we're designing substations, doing lighting design, architectural work, that type of opportunity. MRO is probably the largest field that diverse suppliers participate with, which are your safety glasses, your repairs, your consumables, as it relates to janitorial supplies, and everything that's needed to support the overall National Grid organization from a day-to-day operational standpoint. Then my specific area, which is facilities, is also a great opportunity where we do everything from plumbing, carpentry, electrical, painting, roof repair, anything that involves the operation and the maintenance of a building falls into that category. Logistics is another interesting opportunity, as we tend to work with the large logistics providers such as DHL and UPS, but we also have need for smaller volume, shorter distance transportation between sites. Fleet spares, these are your oil filters, oil consumables and things like that. Fuel and fuel transport is the energy that's needed to keep things going. And of course, manned guard services are self-evident there. So with that, if you'd like to take me to the next slide, please. So as an example, these are the multitude of projects. When asked to provide some examples of projects, I have a list of about 225 projects. So they asked me to maybe cut that down a little bit and have a shorter list for you, which I've done here. But as you can see, we do everything from electrical to sanitary system upgrades, generators, fire alarm replacements, just general renovation and demolition. We have a wide variety of projects, and in my 10 years at National Grid, I've had the opportunity to work in many of the different areas, including in gas and energy efficiency and environmental. And I can say without a doubt that the facilities organization, they go from soup to nuts, that's for sure. So as you can see on the right-hand corner column, you can see that our top 5 MBE suppliers, which includes Grimes Oil for fuel, SHI International, that's for computer equipment, Select Language, I believe that's for translation services, Minuteman Trucks, again for logistics, and I'm not real familiar with integration, but they are on our top list there. Tier 1 primes are Enixer, Verizon, DXC Technology, PHH, and Power Engineers. Enixer is our prime supplier of consumables. DXC and Verizon are our technology partners. PHH is a firm that assists us with rentals. And then Power Engineers is a engineering firm. So as you can see, each of these different areas, there's a lot of different opportunities and wide-ranging needs throughout the organization. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to, my apologies. We'll go to the next slide and we'll go talk to supplier registration. To go through supplier registration, you go through the business services group, and that's where you would register your business. You click on the registration form and follow the instruction tab. When you fill out the main tab on the spreadsheet, you fill out your diverse category and submit the completed form to the vendor onboarding at nationalgrid.com email. And obviously, we'd like you to also notify the supplier diversity team that you've done that registration. At that point, somebody from the supply chain CSR team will follow up with you for the next steps. So you can see the link that's listed there below. And now for the question and answer period, we'll turn it over to Jim Brooks. Thank you.
Okay. Let me just check the view here. So that was fantastic. I trust everyone can hear me. We did get a lot of questions into the chat, so I'm going to kick it off, following up on some things that Carla mentioned around mentorship and communication and partnership. And I guess the question is that, as suppliers are identified and begin to do business with National Grid, take me a little bit on that journey of creating partnership, because you mentioned, or several speakers mentioned, of course, safety, reliability, and as a consumer, we all want that from National Grid, of course. And how do you not just choose them to do business, but then to sort of make sure that they're successful, work with them to even grow their opportunities within National Grid or even outside of National Grid? What's your relationship management with your minority suppliers like? Is that a Carla question or a Len question? Len, you hit on this a little bit.
I guess
I can start. I was looking for my mute button.
Oh.
No, absolutely. I can start. The journey of being a supplier with National Grid and relationship management with National Grid. I think it's a really good and right question. So at the last session, there was a really good question on, if supplier registers with National Grid, how do we know if they are going to be applicable for a tier 1 opportunity or a tier 2 opportunity? And we have been addressing that question internally. And so a part of what you see the difference this time around from the last time around on the registration process is that there is a button that we're asking you to kind of press to inform us that you have registered as a supplier. My team has registered as a supplier so that we can do the first assessment, right? So let's say that you have now been assessed, and based on the criteria that we have, we then make a decision on which is the best team that we introduce you to. Taking you into the journey of how you then become a supplier for a tier 1 or a tier 2 opportunity, that really then kind of falls into the procurement organization to kind of figure out. And so Len is here kind of talking about that piece of it from the gas construction services side of the house. And and Eric Crawford is here to talk from the indirect part of the house and how you kind of develop them. We do track our spend from year on year. So that's one way, so that we're able to see who our top 10 MWBEs are, what their spend was last year. We've actually can look 3 years back and see, what's happening with the spend. We look at that spend and we can look at it by jurisdiction so that we can see what's happening in New England versus New York. We can also look at it across each of the 4 procurement categories to kind of see what's happening with spend with a particular supplier. Then it becomes, where are the true opportunities in the future, and how do we manage that and what do they look like year on year so that they are able to be looked, can they handle additional work with National Grid? That kind of goes a little bit broader than what my team can do, but we kind of look at the scale of what they, like any other supplier, quite frankly, that's working with us, can they take on additional work on National Grid if something that's coming up? And that assessment, maybe somebody can pick up inside of the procurement team on how that might work once they are working for National Grid and how we might grow them, which I don't know if it would change if it were a non-diverse, quite frankly. I think it's supply development in general.
So I think, Carla, just to kind of tie off with that, first of all, it doesn't change whether a diverse or non-diverse supplier. We have stringent qualifications for all our contractors, not prohibitive, but restrictive. One of the areas that we concentrate on, particularly in gas construction and electric construction, is that they are safe and they go through a rigorous process, such as we have a requirement that anybody who performs actual services on our property has to be a member of an organization called ISN. They kind of monitor our safety standards and make sure our contractors are up to snuff. So before you can even bid on anything with National Grid, you have to have a passing grade with ISN. Above and beyond that, we tend to talk to people at the outset, see if there's any kind of fit with what we have a need for. From there, we set up a meet and greet, and we kind of talk to you about where you may fit, what you are looking for, and if we have an opportunity for you. If we pass that phase, then we start looking at the actual business that you are in. We come out and do a site visit and so on and so forth. So all in all, it's a stringent process, it's a thorough process, but it's also an engaging and inviting process. So hopefully that doesn't sound too daunting to all of you.
Great, thank you. Len, you mentioned you guys put holes in the streets, and you've got some holes in my streets in Dorchester right now going on. And, I think, part of the question, and I think Eric had some of it up there, but how does one know what opportunities are coming up locally within Boston, within Massachusetts? Is there a place to go? Or do you find that out once you go through the registration process? How do you know what's sort of on the list? Eric had a great list of upcoming opportunities, but how do I know that these things are happening?
So we have a myriad of ways of doing that, particularly in the construction arenas, and in a lot of what Eric does. We have bids, we get work plans for all of that work typically. So we kind of know ahead of time what that work is going to be constituted. So we tie that back to who our contractors are. Here's the work, who fits into that bucket. So we have what we develop bid lists for each of the different categories. I won't get into a whole lot of detail about that, but we have specific bid lists. We have specific bid lists not only for services, but for products, whether it's materials or services. So we can pick which folks have already fit and plug them into those respective bids.
Eric, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Jim. So for our group, it's a little bit different. And I think to maybe to do some analogies here, unlike the public sector as far as governmental work, where they actually take out ads in the newspaper and advertise upcoming bids, National Grid's a little bit different. We don't approach it that way. The first thing that we do is our team tends to get to know our suppliers very well, the procurement organization, and also the business. And what we do is that we have an internal checklist based on different criteria of knowing what the supplier as best able to perform. And then we compare that to the upcoming projects. One of the main reasons why we don't advertise the upcoming projects is that there are shifts in project timelines and schedules and opportunities, and it would be a little bit harder to do it through a normal advertising channel. So my best advice to the participants here is be very thorough as to knowing what the best attribute of your company and what you're really the best at. Where we like to make sure that we've had suppliers in the past that tell us they can do everything. And what would happen is that supplier may fail, and that then causes further issues and complications down the line. So being very truthful with yourself as to what you're good at, and then being able to inform the respective procurement teams, this is why I'm best fit. And then we manage our project list internally. And then from that knowledge, we're able to pull from the supply base that we've become intimate with, and do similarly what Len does, and develop the bid list for suppliers to participate. And then whenever they go through the participation process, there's a technical component and then a commercial component, and those two ultimately lead to the award of the bid. So hopefully that was descriptive enough, and thank you.
No, that's great. I think the bottom line message here is that if you want to get on National Grid's radar, go through that registration process and let them know who you are, what you're capable of, and get that ball rolling first, because you're not going to see an ad in the Globe that says, "Hey, you want to pave my the West Roxbury parking lot that you have on your list there." You got to get on the list. So I want to explore a little bit more about the whole, several times mentioned tier 2 or subcontractor relationships, and sort of how those form. Do you guys play matchmaker? Do your primes go and get someone and then you have to approve them? How does the whole, if a lot of opportunities in that sort of tier 2 or subcontractor space, Do I register with National Grid if I feel like I'm a good tier 2, or do I try to go through one of your primes?
Yeah, I think there's let me just touch on, before I answer that, let me just touch on the previous question, because I think it's just important to tie on. So having been in procurement in the public, I do understand how the question is posed, how do I get visibility? And that's really the importance of the supplier diversity team. So that step that we included that said, once you register, then notify us, is really important, because we're the ones who know what's going on. We're the ones, so the inside that I could go to a Nicola, or I can go to a Len, or I can go to an Eric to say, okay, I've got this great supplier, they've come on board, this is their kind of their profile. So we are your gateway in. So that's kind of answering the previous question. So then this whole tier 2 and should they register? Absolutely, they should register with National Grid. We can have the discussion around where they best fit, but they have got to come into our window so that we know. When you talk about, you saw the list of the non-diverse suppliers, and how do they get access to them, and those introductions that take place. It's better, I have to turn that back over to Len to try to understand that part of it. But the first part, I don't want you to lose the fact that you must register with National Grid so that we can then make the decision on our side, so we know, hey, they're not quite where they need to be for opportunities for tier 1 for us, but there's an opportunity for tier 2. And then hence there's these criteria that Len started to outline that's required, maybe not so much for Eric's categories, but for Len's categories for sure. So Len, I'm not sure if you want to try to pick this up, how that might take its shape with the Howlands of the world.
Sure, just briefly, the best referrals I get are both internal and external, both from our primes and our contractors that we currently work for, and from internal folks within National Grid, as well as folks who register online. So it's not any one source that we always rely on. It's a little bit more stringent when we're talking about construction services, because that's a defined and confined arena. However, in tier 2, there's a myriad of ways to get into National Grid and get a conversation going. It's key to get those conversations going so we can identify who you are, and then tie back, as Eric alluded to what the opportunities are and where that fit is. So I hope that kind of answered that question.
Yeah, no, thank you. We have a very specific question in the chat around opportunities for IT and security services. We are a managed security services provider that focuses on both cybersecurity and physical security. So how would that attendee connect, and are there opportunities for IT and security services?
Yeah, so that's a
Carla, is that for you?
That's an Eric one.
That's an Eric one, all right.
Yes.
So I'll help out. The very first thing you should do is go register on the website and make Carla's team aware of what your capabilities are. That's always the first and best way to go forward. Then what would happen would be that Carla and her team would reach out to a fellow category manager of mine who manages the IT portion of the spend. They would then be able to have conversations with the team and be able to then progress you further. For managed services on my side, so again, you go through Carla, discuss your profile, what areas of interest that you have. Again, pick a few specialities that you have, and then that way we can clearly articulate to our business partners internally as to, here's an opportunity for us once we've had that opportunity to assess. So again, I think Len mentioned a little bit earlier, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that ISN is not just a gas requirement. ISN is a National Grid requirement. So all medium and high risk work requires ISN participation. Any low risk work does not require it. And again, Carla and her team can help with those discussions after you register.
Great. I think it was Len that brought up welding. Was it you, Len, that brought up the need for welders?
Yes.
So someone in the chat amplified your comment about there being a shortage of welders and noted that it's a national problem. Actually, I didn't know that, so I learned something today.
Yeah.
I guess the question is when a company like yours is confronted with that type of either skill shortage, supplier shortage, what do you do about it? Do you partner with training schools? Do you try to help sort of stand up a business or support a business to get going in that field? Anything going on in that realm?
So there's a myriad of ways that happens, but let me just key in on a few of them. One of the first places that I look is to our primes and talk about what are the barriers to entry and how do folks get involved in that. But we also have other programs. In Massachusetts, we have some programs where we bring in vocational students every year who are looking to get into the utility industry. And we kind of acclimate them to the different parts of the business so they can actually see what it is we do as a utility company. They meet folks internally. We've had even some of them go out to our sites where they do training and see how we train our folks and climb poles and dig holes and all of that. So there's a myriad of ways that we get folks involved in how we actually do that business. So we're in the community. We make sure that the community stays involved, and we use a variety of things like this to get folks engaged.
Great. I'm going to squeeze in one more question before I close it out from the chat. And there was a question about whether or not subcontractors are primes. Is being union shops, is that a requirement, an obstacle? I mean, how do you deal with that?
For the most part, with construction services, particularly at primes, there is typically a union component. If not a union component, there is a component whereby you have to qualify for these. For instance, with gas, you have to go be trained in that. You can't just walk in off the street and say, I know how to do gas, do that. We have a lot of other utility contractors who do water and sewer and IT. We don't typically align with them because it's a different type of a business. There's a lot of other requirements. So it depends on the arena that we're looking at, to be honest with you.
So it sounds like it's not necessarily union that is the issue. It's really certification and training. A combination, yeah,
depending on territory. Combination, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that hour. Do you want to get in, Eric?
Yeah. No. So Len has very specific requirements whenever it comes to gas. However, my construction group is a lot different. He has very specific needs for gas pipeline and has a lot of criteria. I'm not saying that we're not as concerned with safety. We are. It's just that we require a much less, I don't want to say diligent. Our welding, our union requirements are different than gas constructions. We, in some areas of our business, we do require union labor. In other areas, we don't. And also, it comes back to the same thing as far as general construction. I think there's a much broader opportunity within my group from a facilities construction perspective, as we work with general labor, we work with welders, we work with plumbers, all of those different organizations, and again, have a much different level than what Len has. So as far as requirements are concerned, I'm not saying that it's less stringent, it's just that there's different levels and more attainable levels of certification in my construction area.
Great. Well, thank you all. I mean, this has really been great, and appreciate your answers, appreciate the questions put in the chat by the attendees. A really remarkable overview of the work done by National Grid, and I think on behalf of the greater Boston business community and all of us here in Massachusetts, thank you for the thoughtfulness and intentionality of your efforts in this space. It's very much appreciated. If there's two big takeaways, I would say it is register your company, get to know National Grid by doing that, and remember the name Carla Ramsny. If you're on this event, that's the name you want to remember. So thank you for that. And finally, our next Pacesetters doing business with will be on May 10th at 4 p.m., featuring the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office. Many of us talked about procurement in the business sector, and Pacesetters started in private sector companies. But the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a new approach to their procurement through this Supplier Diversity Office, and you're going to learn about their ways of doing business, certification with the state, and how they intend to move forward in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that should be interesting. Once again, thank you to all my friends at National Grid for both of these sessions and all the work you do, and thank you to the attendees, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks,
Jim.